Gen Z may be the most misunderstood generation. I've never seen one age group with so much criticism directed at it. And it's like the whole system is against them. And this makes me very suspicious. When I see everyone in every system coming against a group like this, I'm beginning to wonder if they could become our greatest generation.
So as our resident Gen Zer here, and George, with you being Gen Z at heart, we've discovered, we wanted to, in this podcast, break down why Gen Z is so unique and what this system is we're talking about and why these reactions are happening. Because to me, these reactions excite me because it feels like Gen Z is on the cusp of being the freest generation ever.
I think it's over the top. I mean, I think all Gen Z is really trying to say, and let me just quote Phil from that epic movie Groundhog Day.
I'm not going to live by their rules anymore.
And we want to get into that in this podcast because what you're going to hear is we really truly believe Gen Z can become the greatest generation through free enterprise.
And George, it's so refreshing to hear someone from your generation actually speak positive about us Zoomers here, because all we see in the media, all I'm hearing in work is Gen Z complaints. Gen Z doesn't do this. Gen Z is not good enough at that. And then being part of Gen Z, I talk to Gen Z and we have a lot of complaints, I'll admit. We complain a lot about how this adult system that we've been brought into just doesn't seem to make any sense anymore. It doesn't seem to work anymore.
I know I'm Gen Z at heart because over my lifetime, I would see rules and I'm going like, those rules don't make any sense. And I would do something else. To give the Phil quote a little more context, he's actually driving on the railroad tracks when he says it.
Oh, yeah. Don't drive on the railroad track.
Well, Phil, that's one I happen to agree with.
So there are some rules, and we're going to get into this, that you might want to follow. That's all I'm saying. But we want to get to some very practical ways you guys can take action. But honestly, it's going to be centered in who you are.
It sounds like it's easy. It sounds simple when you say that, George, but I know from my own personal experience and a lot of my friends and other people I've went to school with, we're really struggling to know who exactly we are, that we've all been inundated by this system and it's kind of tried to feed us into it. And now that we're kind of at the brink here, we're about to be adults, we're asking, are we really these system creatures that it's created, or is there more to life? And I feel like that's the crossroads we're at right now.
Well, I've got news for you, AJ. You are an adult. Whether you want to be or not. And, you know, if you go back like 200 years, you know, they started being adults like at 14, 15, and 16.
Yeah, and that's a really good point because I've thought about this a lot too as, yeah, sure, I'm an adult now and I'm adulting and all that fun stuff. But like people used to be adults coming at 14, 15, like you said, but now I'm 23 and I don't know when the heck I'm going to be able to afford to provide 3 meals a day for a kid or buy another car or buy a house, or my vacations have to stay limited right now. Like, I don't know when I'm actually going to start feeling like adult. Like I still feel like a young adult, like a college kid. I still feel like I'm in this transition phase because I feel like the development curve has been so elongated recently.
Well, and coming against this generation, and I think we want to get into this a little bit, there's a lot of forces, and you came of age during this pandemic. I've talked to guys on airplanes and stuff like that. They graduated on Zoom from high school and college. You didn't get into college live for like 2 years, right?
Yeah, I graduated high school 2019, had 1 semester of college, normal. Second semester got blown up. And then the next 2 semesters after that were a mixture of all online to a hybrid learning type of thing.
So then the adults, quote unquote, the employers, your managers, your big corporations all criticize Gen Z because they're not socializing properly. Well, you were the people who messed it up.
You were the ones who took the key social years where you go from kid in the system to being an independent adult and said, no, you're going to live at home with your parents and do everything on the computer. and
Right.
talk to nobody else.
And get this, because I follow this stuff, right? And they're also saying, then the pandemic's over, okay? That doesn't have anything to do with you can still stay at home and not come to work. You can just click on the, just work at home alone. And then, and then like, what was it, 15 years ago or something? These adults invented iPhones and Androids and all that kind of stuff. So we could screw up everything. There's a lot of advantages to the phones, okay? I'll admit. But look, this is a huge issue. And we don't teach our kids. Mm-hmm. I'm watching parents not understand when their toddler is watching them on the phone and not giving them attention. And why is that little box so important? And so they grab for the phone, because it's obviously more important than they are. Oh, wow. I like them apples.
Man, I've never thought about that. But that's exactly what you're telling a little toddler who doesn't know any better. Whatever on that box is the coolest thing in the world. It gets all my mom or dad's attention all the time.
Oh, and it's more important than me.
Yeah, they spend more time with it than me. Like, look at their screen time. It's probably 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. And how many times do you actually spend just you and your child? Yeah.
So like you grew up, you grew up. Do you ever remember not seeing iPhones or phones? And it doesn't have to be an iPhone, but a phone like that, cell phones?
My very early childhood, like kindergarten-ish. And then I remember my mom got a BlackBerry for the first time, and it was the coolest thing I ever saw. And it had just a little game where you just had to move a little brick to bounce a ball back and forth. Right. It was very, very simple, but it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen as like a 6 or 7-year-old kid, whenever it was.
Yeah. So see, nobody's considering this.
And as you're saying all of that, George, this is reminding me of a poll I saw recently that Harris did for Fortune magazine, and it found that 82% of all knowledge workers think that Gen Z is lacking soft skills and interpersonal skills as they enter the workforce. And it's exactly like what you said. It's because you stepped on our development curve. You stepped on our social development, and the time when we were supposed to be getting ready to develop these interpersonal skills for you knowledge workers in the workforce, you adult knowledge workers, you just took it away from us, and then now we're complaining that we don't have the skills you took away from us.
Well, it's actually a little worse than that. And I'm going to grab a thing out of your vocabulary here and just go, it's like, where were these adults? Well, why didn't the adults at the time you're growing up in your most formative years teach you social skills with using a phone or social media? And there's all sorts of stuff on this right out there, but fundamentally that's the breakdown. And the reason they didn't show you, I can answer this question. The reason they didn't show this because they don't know how to do it either. And they don't socialize any better than Gen Z does, but they just had a period of life where they didn't have these issues. Like there wasn't Facebook when they were growing up. There wasn't phones like that. There were telephones, they were landlines. You could get we had a 30-foot phone cord on the receiver upstairs because I have all these sisters, and you could follow the phone cord into the different rooms as to where, they're talking to all their boyfriends. So they were on the phone hours. Okay. Of course, you could pick up the downstairs phone and listen to everything they were saying.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah.
As a brother. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah. It's such a key insight right there, George, is we're being compared to 23 and 24, and we're being compared to Gen X and the boomers when they were the same age, and they didn't have any of the same pressures. They didn't have any of the same technology. And also, as they're complaining, I love how you're talking about this, because it's not finger pointing at Gen Z. There's a lot of, your thumb pointing back at your own generation, where it's like, yeah, it was your job to teach us all of this stuff, to teach us how to adapt to all of this technology. And if you're complaining about it, maybe you didn't do your job right.
Yeah, let's get into some details here, because I think this would be really helpful. Like what you're experiencing, like in your big corp job. So AJ is in the middle of big corp And, as you're developing side hustles, this being one, and, trying to find that entrepreneurial main hustle, talk about some of the stuff that's going on there.
Yeah, and that article broke it down a little bit further here. And like the interpersonal skills, just being able to connect with people and talk, that's the low hanging fruit, I feel. But I'm also hearing a lot of complaints about lack of career ambition, in the sense that previous generations, they left college, they joined the corporation, and everybody was very, very ambitious and excited to just climb up that ladder and get as high as they could. Where Gen Z is getting there and like, oh, I'm cool with this rung on the ladder. I'm happy with this rung on the ladder. And then a lot of managers are translating that as Gen Z has a low work ethic. They don't have high ambition. They don't want to work that hard. They don't want to do that much. They're just here to get a check and enjoy their life. And I think that criticism is very unfair in disregarding everything that we just talked about relating to the pressures Gen Z is facing.
Yeah, this is the unique thing, I think, in this generation is that my hunch is they have a different value system. And the old value system, which you and I have talked on previous podcasts on, and it bears to continue talking about, is this mentality. And it definitely starts with the boomers and their World War II generation, and then the Xers and et cetera, et cetera. And it's this whole thing actually probably started with the Social Security Act. And that is, you work for 40 some odd years, you build up your retirement, and then you retire and die. Retirement really, if you really look at what it is, it's like waiting to die. Now, you might be doing it on a nice cruise ship or something like that, but I mean, it's come on. And I've never bought into this, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's like, I think Gen Z doesn't buy into that system.
Yeah, that's a spot on observation, George, because we don't want to just enjoy the last 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 years of our life, if we're lucky, collecting Social Security checks. No, we only have, average lifespans like 80 years. We want to enjoy all of it. There's no reason. We just got out of a fun childhood. Like, air conditioning's great. This technology's been fun to be around as a kid. And we don't see any reason that we can't continue to enjoy life. The world is pretty good. And so why do we have to just climb this ladder? Why is everything all about the amount of income we're bringing in and how many cruises I'm going to be able to afford when I'm 60? I think they can. Does it still have to be that model where it's 40 years, you dedicate 40 years of your life to the system so that you can get the back end back? Or I feel like we could do it all a different way.
Well, and AJ, I've got to say, it's not 60. By the time you get to the they'll have pushed it out even further. But yeah, I never bought into that system. And the illustration, and we've talked about this before, is in college, or as I was getting out of college, I borrowed all this money. Well, all my friends were borrowing money, and they were starting their new job, and they bought a car, let's say, or they were trying to, whatever they wanted to buy, get everything really nice. Mm-hmm. I didn't want any of that. I drove an old crappy VW. All right. I instead borrowed all this money and I traveled the world and Europe, Asia, the world. And it was the most transformative thing in my life, and experiencing other cultures. This was Europe on like $1 a day trip, kind of a thing. And we had a blast. And we learned a ton, and it was a small group. And this is why I'm like, I get it. Literally, the system doesn't understand this generation.
Yeah, and I feel like if you were to make your process a system where after college you go and travel the world rather than go right into work, I feel like that's kind of what we're seeking to. And what you did there is you went to different cultures, you saw how they operate, you saw how they enjoy their life, how they organize their society. And that gave you, I'm sure, a ton of information on how you wanted to set up your life. And so as Gen Z is struggling with identity, if we could all travel and see what's the rest of the world doing, what are other systems that exist out there, and how do they work and bring fulfillment to people? Because most of us, especially with the cost of travel now, we can't get out of the country. We can't go see other cultures. We can't afford to go and see these other systems that we desperately need to see, I feel like.
Well, okay. I'm going to give you a little pushback on that, because when you keep bringing up, like, it's so expensive. Look, it was really expensive back when I did it too. But here's the thing. If you think free enterprise, if you start thinking creatively, then what starts to happen is you start figuring ways around the system. You don't have to fly. You could get a berth on a boat, like a oil tanker or something. You could there's crazy ways you could find other ways to get across the ocean. I'm just saying.
No,
you may not want to, but this exposes you to all kinds of people. You got to get away from the tech. You got to get away from the air conditioning. You got to get out. And when you start to do that, you know what happens? It helps you begin to figure out who you are.
As you break away from the system that has tried to tell you who you are for the past, 18 years of formal public education plus college, you had another 4. They're trying to tell you who you are, and they're trying to craft you into a corporate robot, basically.
I mean, you got to get out of your growing up environment, because that's actually what I think has held Gen Z back from discovering who they are. And so, like, way back in the early 60s, John Kennedy, the president, started the Peace Corps. There's mission opportunities. I mean, global kind of stuff, and immersing in other cultures. I mean, the first thing I did in another culture was a homestay in a very, very poor town, farm town in Tuscany. And I was in Tuscany, but it was still very poor. But what I discovered was the joy of that family. Later, I would find that deep in the heart of Mexico, with I'm like, these people are happier than I've ever been, and they have next to nothing. This is what, and you start to realize, whoa, holy smokes, there's way more. And the thing is it's about figuring out who you are and who you're intended to be.
It's funny that you say that, because as you just brought up the Peace Corps here, George, I'm like, I would never join the Peace Corps. Those people are broke. The system has so trained us to think that any job where it's like the Peace Corps, where you're going out and doing good, that's actually bad for you, is basically what the system teaches us.
Yeah. Okay. That just clicked a story with me. Okay. So at university, I was at a big school, and I knew all the top people at the school, and a lot of them were my mentors that I would go to for advice. And I just told you I traveled. We were gone like 3 or 4 months. Okay. And you'll hear stories later, but it changed my worldview. And there was this opportunity to go, basically, it was a mission field kind of opportunity. It was in the US to work with at-risk boys. Let me tell you what 100% of my mentors in the system told me. Let me just guess, AJ. What do you think they said?
Don't do that. It's going to hurt your income potential in the future. You're starting your career off on the wrong foot. You're going to be starting off way behind all of your other college peers that you're graduating with. And you're way smarter than that, George. You're destined for way more. Right.
The kinder ones would say, well, do that later, once you've made some income. Let me tell you something. The 20s are the years to do that. You have nothing to lose. Take the risks now. Get used. Train yourself to take risks. The system, here's the insidious thing about the system, is that it wants you to play it safe, and that kills the soul of a man. Let me say that again. The system wants you to play it safe. And for men, that kills our soul. Men are risk takers. Not crazy risk takers like driving on the railroad tracks, but we need to be stretched. We need challenges. We love that.
It's like we like to do things that only make sense to us. It only made sense to you to go out and help those at-risk kids. It only made sense to you to go travel and take on debt to do so right out of college. And that was fun because you're and it's inspiring me right now because it's like I need to figure out what risks I need to take. Because you're now in that process, you're daring to figure out who you actually are rather than playing it safe and being like, oh, this is what everybody else is, so I'll just be like that.
Yeah. And you know what? You got to fail. You've got to fail. You've got to hit. And how do you fail on a video game? Oh, well, the orc came in and took all my gold or something. I don't know. That's not failure. Okay, guys, just saying. See, I think if Gen Z figures out any of the stuff we're talking about, they're going to explode into free enterprise. Because I think they've got the mindset, the values that are going to feed that kind of thinking. And if they grab free enterprise and they go into it, oh my gosh, they will start to change their world. And I think as the movement grows, I think it changes the world.
I think the problem is that freedom allows for too much unpredictability, where systems, they're designed to produce consistent results. And that's why these two concepts are naturally opposed to each other.
I think it's worse than that, AJ. Freedom is the enemy of systems. And there are all kinds of systems out there, guys. Government, business, religious, family, education, not to mention every bureaucracy ever invented. And I think Gen Z is up against all of them. So let's dig into this, because what we want to do is take apart systems and explain how they work, because Gen Z's got to understand what they're up against and why they're up against it. Because we think that the questions they're asking, the freedoms they're thinking about pursuing actually threaten the system. And I'm not so sure this is some conscious diabolical plot. Could be. But it definitely fits the overall historical flow of humanity and history. You see, systems eventually will crush individuals into submission. They're not negotiable. This isn't a negotiation. Give me a little bit of freedom. You can just go through the pages of history and see this repeated over and over and over again.
Yeah, and this is all reminding me of a quote from one of my favorite books, 1984 by George Orwell.
Well, why would that surprise me? It's your favorite book. Keep going.
He says, the party, aka the system, is not concerned with perpetuating its blood, but perpetuating itself. Who wields the power is not important, provided the hierarchical structure remains always the same.
Okay, AJ, just for my sake, please, could you explain that just a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So it's saying like the system isn't interested in being a monarchy where it's just perpetuating the same bloodline at the top. It's just like what you said. The system is interested in keeping the system in place. And to me, it reminds me of the common quote, misery loves company, where it's like the boomers and the Gen Xers and the millennials have bought into this system where you go through formal education and then you give up the next 40 years of your life and then you can maybe enjoy the back end in retirement. And all of their criticism of Gen Z is the fact that we're not trying to get in that miserable boat.
Yeah, but AJ, here's the deal. And it's kind of like when they say, well, that's not the political party of your grandparents, Well, no, it's not. It changed. The systems of the World War generation, the boomers, the Gen Xers, it's not the system of today. And it's not a single system we're talking about here, guys. We're talking about a whole variety of systems, and they're morphing and changing constantly. And what I like about that Orwellian quote, AJ, is that the systems are going to maintain the system at all costs, and it will sacrifice whatever it happens. But I've said from the beginning, there's all kinds of systems. There's business systems, there's government systems, here political systems, there are religious systems, in churches, synagogues, family systems. We need to get into a little bit of that, because I think it's a whole combination of systems, and it's not like you're fighting a war on one front, like it's the government system. No. Oh, it's definitely one of them, but it's everywhere. And here's how I know it's not just the government, because the government really only reflects, in our country, what the people want. It's a reflection of the culture. It's a reflection of the society. And so that's how I know, look, this is much bigger.
There's a lot to cover there, but this is the Get Business Savvy podcast, so we'll focus on the business systems here. But George, how is the business system working against Gen Z?
Well, first of all, you've already described part of it. It's like we have these big corps, and they do have a plan for us. And they want us to come in and turn the levers and make their corporation really run nicely. And then we get spit out 40 years later or something, But the world's changing. One of the things I've noticed is a really subtle language shift. Orwell talks about the use of language, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of the primary mechanisms of control.
Right. Here's what they've done. They've turned capitalists into entrepreneurs. They've completely bastardized the word. So what's a capitalist? Well, the iconic capitalist was a guy who, like back in the 19th century, the railroads, you'd have the robber barons. So they build these monopolies, and they control the whole railroads. If you've ever played the game called Monopoly, it's a lot of fun, right? But the whole idea is you want to own the whole board. And that's a capitalist. And they work however they can with government to make that happen.
Yeah, that's great you bring up the 19th century, because that's also known as the Gilded Age. And many historians are actually arguing right now that we're living through a second Gilded Age, where there's all these robber barons and all these monopolists and what you just called capitalists who have co-opted the word entrepreneur, who are working with the government, who are creating these massive corporations where they have complete control over their market or their industry, and they're just screwing everybody else in the process.
Yeah, and on top of that, the government is picking winners and losers.
Yeah, exactly. Just like the Gilded Age. There's a famous case with Union Pacific, one of the biggest railroads, making the Transcontinental Railroad. And to finish the railroad, they created a shell construction company, and then they charged double the construction cost to the government and pocketed all the money. And then, as a way of avoiding investigation from the government, they just gave a few influential congressmen some stock in that company so that they would stay quiet. That reminds me a lot of today, where every time a congressman has proposed a stock trading ban for congressmen, it's just dead on arrival and never gets to a vote.
Look, this is important to understand, because the history here, it's human beings, okay? And so once you get, there's this natural gravitational pull toward bigger and bigger. Now, here's the fascinating thing. The empires of the past, okay, so if we look at just whole countries, okay, Rome would be the largest. And if you look at a chart of history and countries and tribes and peoples, what you see is that since Rome breaks down and to the British Empire, which was like a quarter of the world, okay? But when you fast forward all the way to today, and this is the interesting trend of history, is that these countries and tribes are getting smaller and smaller. I'll give you an example. I can remember a country called Yugoslavia. It's now like 5 countries, and it probably wasn't much bigger than New Jersey to begin with. And it's the Dalmatian coastline. You've got Dubrovnik, you've got Split, you've got Rijeka. But they're all now in different countries. They used to all be the same. Now, the reason it was held together was because of a dictator. And when the dictator died, then it broke up into its natural tribal pieces. This is why these systems, I think there's a natural ebb and flow, and that at some point the system breaks and breaks apart. And it breaks apart along natural fracture lines. And I think what's going to happen here, and I think what Gen Z is it's one of those fracture lines. And that's where I think this whole concept of free enterprise that can come against the systems, and it's not a system, is that it's going to fracture into smaller companies.
Yeah, because as you said that, the countries are getting smaller, but the companies are getting bigger, and they're all multinational now. And right. So would you describe that as the current empire? I would describe it as like the American capitalist empire, where our big businesses are running the world.
You've got companies that are larger than whole countries, like they're larger than, they're in the top 10 nations in the world kind of size, and you're like, okay, there's like 192 nations or something, and they're bigger than 180 of them or something. I don't know. But it's like, yeah, it's just this natural human nature to want to control everything and rule the world, I guess. I can't imagine why. This is the Gen Z in me coming out. I'm like, why can't I just make a good living and have rich families and life and friendships? And, why do I have to rule the world and have a $1 billion company? Or, all these get rich schemes, which we've taken a stab at, they don't work. And they're all on YouTube. And it's how you can make, I just saw a few today, like how you can get rich in 6 months with Mark Cuban's. How you doing on that, boy? And you're kind of like, what are you talking about? Why do I want to get rich in 6 months? We're at a very interesting pivot point from a number of different measures. And I think Gen Z could be the greatest generation to lead us into free enterprise.
Well, George, if capitalism is a system we need to push against, what's free enterprise and how is that any different?
Free enterprise is really, just think of it like pure business. Okay. So it's private businesses they're operating in competition, and they're largely free of state control. I would almost add, it's like, think of the game Monopoly. Okay. So there's, you buy 3 colors of the same property or 2 colors, that you get a little Monopoly going. And the whole idea of Monopoly is to crush every other player with rent. So you got to build hotels and you want to crush them with rent. Okay. I don't think that's free enterprise. I think that's capitalism. And if you look at when Monopoly was developed by Parker Brothers, it's in that age. It's at that time. And capitalism was a deal. Pure free enterprise, I don't think minds that you own the monopoly with St. Charles and I've got Pennsylvania Avenue and I've got those because those are the greens and they're better rent. But I'm not trying to crush out St. Charles, and St. Charles isn't trying to crush out Pennsylvania Avenue.
It's really funny that you brought up St. Charles as an example because I love the oranges. It's the most cost efficient to develop and the rent is great. The greens, your Pennsylvania Avenue is too expensive to develop. You'll go bankrupt before you can get hotels.
Well, we should play and find out. Now that we know. But I think free enterprise, there's more, it's a more collaborative type thing. In other words, if I'm a roofing company and I'm in one town and you're a roofing company in another town and we're never going to compete, I'm probably willing to share ideas with you and collaborate and have a mastermind group and learn how to make roofs better in my town and you learn how to make roofs better in your town. A capitalist system is, the hell I'm doing that. I'm not giving away any of my trade secrets. He might open up a business in my town. That's what the capitalists would do. I'd learn all your secrets, then open up a roofing business in your town and drive you out of business. And if I could get a couple of state legislators to vote some stuff that would help me, all the better.
And that reminds me of what you wrote in the prologue of your book, where you said Mr. A equated entrepreneurship with freedom, i.e. free enterprise. Entrepreneurs, in Mr. A's view, are a creative force who undertake some kind of endeavor while accepting risk with no guarantee of reward. They are a type of personality who flourish in a free society.
Yeah, this is fundamental to the concept. So Mr. A, guys, so the book are letters from Mr. A, who is the sage, seasoned entrepreneur, with the young guy Max, and Max is the wannabe entrepreneur, and he's writing Mr. A. So the book is correspondence between these two. Honestly, Max is Gen Z. I mean, he really is a Gen Z kind of person. So let me just read a little bit more from the prologue. Mr. A recognized entrepreneurship as one of the paths to preserving freedom and even discovering wisdom. Entrepreneurs do this without thinking because of who they are. They see needs, opportunities, and possibilities where others do not. They respond, create, take risks, build businesses, and expand commerce to make life better. I think that gets to the heart of free enterprise. I would actually, and I think since this word entrepreneur has been co-opted by, the big billionaire class, those guys, we did a whole thing on that, on Grow, Grow, Grow. Those guys, they made all their money by going public. They didn't do this. They didn't make life better. Now, I can't say that universally. I mean, Amazon, for example, they want to make life better. So they've all got a make life better kind of thing. But it's just crushing every small bookstore in the world to do it. Mm-hmm. And how is that making life better for those little bookstore owners? Okay. That's the capitalist versus the free enterprise.
Eventually, as they crush the little bookstore owners, now they've consolidated power to this point where if you want to buy books, Amazon's the best place to go. We're not quite there yet, but over time, I imagine that's probably Amazon's aim, is to crush all brick and mortar stores, so that everyone's just ordering online from Amazon, because that's what the capitalist wants. I really like how the flourish in a free society and make life better, and your illustration of just the two roofing companies maybe on opposite sides of a state, where hey, you're making good roofs, I'm making good roofs. What do we do similar? What do we do different? And let's elevate the standards of roofing in our state. And everyone's going to have better roofs, heating efficiency, whatever the benefit is with that. But at the end of the day, they're not looking to cut corners to make money. They're looking to make the best roofs they can, to make the best impact they can, rather than just crushing all their competition and having the most money in their pockets as they can.
So the book is called The Next Level Entrepreneur. You can get it on Amazon. And when we say entrepreneur, guys, what we're talking about are really free enterprisers. See, the term has been, these billionaires have gotten the label entrepreneur. And I think that's absolutely a co-opting of the language, kind of Orwellian, where they're using, instead of being capitalist, because everybody thinks the word capitalist is bad, okay? And so they go, we're not a capitalist. I'm an entrepreneur. I started Amazon in my garage. True, all true. Maybe he was in the garage for 3 days, then they went public. I don't know. But I'm just being cynical. But here's the thing, is that those are not entrepreneurs, guys. Entrepreneur is not, I'm going public. Entrepreneur is really, and maybe we should use this term, a free enterpriser, small business owner. That's who we're talking about. And there's a lot of room for that in America. Look, there's a lot of, and you know what? The internet has opened up all kinds of entrepreneur opportunities. Just listen to our side hustle video, because we expose side hustles, but we're also saying there's some legitimate stuff out there too. And you've got to get your direction, and you've got to know who you are so you can know where you're headed. Free enterprise can be alive and well. Gen Z can usher that in. And
so as you're saying all of that, it's like the market that we're we currently have in the business environment is one that isn't necessarily free. The government's picking winners and losers in some cases.
Right.
There's regulations, there's taxes, there's tax cutouts for certain people that only apply to certain things, and blah, 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 blah. And what you're saying is we need to just create a new market, basically.
Well, actually, so I'm going to just say the word corruption. That's what you're up against. What you just described is corruption. When the government's picking winners and losers, they're not picking them because of the goodness of their heart. They're picking them because someone's greasing their palm with millions and millions of dollars. We know exactly what's going on. The American people are very, very smart. I think Gen Z may be the smartest generation to come along. And here's the fascinating thing. See, okay, so this is a story I've never told. I told you early that I'd done all this travel. I didn't follow the system and go get a job. I borrowed all this money. I went and traveled for 3 or 4 months. One of the places I went was Poland. And this is when there was still something called the Iron Curtain. Okay. And so Poland's controlled by a dictator. It was a very small group of us. We had the leader of our group was a professor from Poland. And this was a group, it was a national group. So we were all from different universities. And he had friends in Poland. And one of his friends traveled with us throughout the entire time. The statute of limitations is way gone by now, if there even is one here. So I feel okay. He was one of the top 3 black marketeers in Poland. And I learned, this is actually where I learned free enterprise. These guys, okay, you're thinking, okay, so they smuggle a few little, they trade a little bit of money, they get some dollars, they trade it into zlotys, that was the currency, or, they get some, stereos, or they get some kind of, appliance, and they trade. No. They're bringing in Mercedes-Benz cars, BMWs by the truckloads.
Oh my.
They are trading. I think, I have no way to prove this. Maybe someone can find this out. I think the black market in Poland, or the underground economy, whatever you want to call it, was larger than the above ground economy. It wouldn't surprise me in the least. And we met very interesting people, and they weren't shady people. These were good people, but they were busting the system. And the system was, you've got to live on, 1 zloty a day or something. You have to do this kind of job. We're talking communism here, guys. We're talking dictatorial rule by a general. And we're traveling all over the country and getting around and meeting all these people. And it's like, the government's in Warsaw, that's the capital, and we're doing whatever we want to do. Because you know what? We tried cooperating and it doesn't work. So we're just going outside of the system completely. I'm not suggesting that. I don't think that's where we are. But I'm saying, if you look over history on repressive regimes throughout all of history, there's a whole nother economy going on. When you shut things down, when you say in whenever that was, the 30s, there's prohibition and there's no liquor, do you think people stopped drinking liquor? No, they didn't stop drinking liquor. They called them speakeasies. That's where they went for their drinks, or they got them. It didn't stop them. And the government tried. The government couldn't stop them. And the government can't stop free enterprise.
And fortunately, we're not behind the Iron Curtain right now. We don't have a dictatorial general controlling everything. Free enterprise still does exist. So it's almost like Gen Z just has to say, all right, we're not going to jump into this capitalist system. We're going to be free enterprisers. We're going to start our own small businesses. We're going to create our own local economies. We're going to build the society that we want to see. One of free society, one of flourishing people, one of happy people, one of entrepreneurs, or formerly known as entrepreneurs, and now we're going to call them free enterprisers because the term's been co-opted.
So here's what you guys need to do to get started. You've got to get clear on one question. Who are you?
Uh, wow. Okay. It sounds very simple, but I can't think of a quick and simple answer off the top of my head to that.
Yeah, I've done a lot of work on this question personally. It does. It's like, oh, well, George, who are you? And I go, well, I guide entrepreneurs. And you're like, no, that's what you do. Who are you? I just want to know who you are. I'm not asking what you do. It's like, oh my God, it's freaking me out. So I want to give you a simple place to begin. I don't know the answer to your question, but here's a simple place. Go to your dreams. As a little boy or as a little girl, what were those dreams? What did you imagine about yourself? And look, they've done a lot to try to kill our imagination, to be really quite honest, or steal it or whatever. But those dreams you had as a kid, the adventures you'd imagine living, or the challenges you might conquer, or the rescues you perform, on and on, all of that stuff, write them down. Just start brainstorming, because it's going to, even if you're like 20 and it wasn't that long ago from my perspective, it's still over half your life, right? That's the key. Just start brainstorming, writing stuff down, those long ago, probably forgotten dreams. And as you start writing them down, you'll be start remembering one after another. You just keep your lists going, and you are going to get incredible clues about who you are. Imagine with me for just a minute if you could make all the rules for your own life. Imagine if you could begin living life on your terms and not someone else's. And just imagine if you begin discovering who you are and living into the complete person you're intended to be. And that you could actually begin to change the world around you and maybe even impact an entire generation. We want to share with you some very practical ways you can begin doing this, regardless of your generation. But specifically for Gen Z, that's the challenge. That's the opportunity for you guys. And I honestly believe you guys could become the greatest generation, especially when it comes to spreading free enterprise.
Now, George, the term greatest generation, that was reserved for the generation that fought in World War II and overcame the Nazis. So does Gen Z have that type of struggle it's got to fight against?
You're right, AJ. The term greatest generation has been used to describe the World War II generation. It was first coined by Tom Brokaw, an NBC anchorman, for his book called The Greatest Generation. And they pushed back and stopped the tyranny of the Nazis. Honestly, I think we may be facing a greater tyranny if it's to the extent of George Orwell's 1984 description, because it's so insidious. It wants to control every aspect of our lives. I think, and this is a hunch, okay, that Gen Z could become the greatest free enterprise generation ever.
So, George, we've talked about a lot of systems out there. Where's this tyranny coming from?
From all of them. And so it's like, so on the political governmental side, they want to control more and more of our lives, take more and more of our hard-earned cash. They want to give us, take away our property rights. I mean, they've got crazy schemes, and they've been, by the way, this isn't new. None of this is new, guys. There's nothing new under the sun. You've got the business systems. We talked about capitalism, and they want to crush everybody out there. And if you're a mom and pop bookstore, well, we want to crush you because you're a threat to my global book company. It's got a name. So, I mean, the religious systems, they want you believing only their thing, or the family system doesn't want you to stray out of the family. You've got to do things our family way, or you're not invited anymore. And it's all of it. And here's why I think free enterprise pushes against all of them, because it's free, and freedom is the enemy of the controlling global local systems that want to take us out.
George, that like perfectly captures what us Gen Zers are feeling. It feels like every system that we're forced into and every system that currently exists, it doesn't work for us, whether it's the school system, the government system, the business system, the church system, just all of them don't seem to be working for us and seem to just be trying to beat us down and trying to put us in these boxes that we don't want to be in. We can see that there's something outside of the box and we want to dance around outside of it.
Okay. I won't even get into the box analogy. We'll save that for another podcast, but it's in my book, The Next Level Entrepreneur. What box? But I'll tease it. So on a broad brush, generationally, what are you guys doing about this?
Mostly complaining at the moment.
Right. And you know what I hear? Here's the way I hear it is somebody needs to do something about this. Is that not true?
Yeah. And
who is the somebody?
And that's I don't know who said this quote, but if not you, then who is what's coming to me.
Well, I'll tell you who I think a lot of times you're talking about with the government. And it comes from the indoctrinating educational system. Because the government is being set up and has been set up to fix all problems. I got news for you guys. Guess who created the problems? The government. They can't fix it. And so the government system is a major system.
Well, George, if you say the government can't do it and we have to do it, how the heck are we going to do that?
Right. And by the way, neither can big business, big pharma, big whoever, right? Gen Z has got to stop looking outward at all the chaos and all the problems, okay? And they need to start looking inward because that's the answer. And they start to need to look at their own passions, their principles, their purpose, your reason for being. Discover who you're intended to be and start living into that.
So, George, instead of focusing on the systems, we just need to answer this simple question that once you give any thought to it is actually a very complicated question. And I don't even know where I can find the answer to.
Right. Here's the irony of all this is you've got to begin an inward journey and start figuring out who you are. And one of the criticisms about Gen Z is that they're all wrapped up into themselves. But I don't think it's wrapped up in the way I'm talking about it. Okay. And when you start unpacking the real you, I think there's 3 steps that we can suggest here that will really help you on this path. And it does. Step 1 is beginning to discover who you are.
So would what I'm good at be a good place to start?
It'd be a great place to start. We'd call them strengths. So what are your gifts? Maybe you've not pursued them. You've got some interests that you maybe never pursued. You've got some skills that you've started to develop, or maybe they're very developed. So yes, that's a great place to start because here's my hunch. Let's say in school you were interested in something mechanical, okay? And so you pursued engineering kind of stuff, or you went to a trade school and learned how to do something that involved your hands and building something. Okay. That's a huge clue about who you are in the sense that you've got mechanical interest. That's something that, building, I like to see projects to their end. I like to see completed stuff. That's really different than if I'm a content creator. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean you can't be. It's just because you can have multiple interests, okay? You can have multiple strengths. But I think that's a great place to start because it's presenting on the surface.
Okay, but if you want to start peeling below the surface, because I feel like this isn't a surface level question, I can list out my strengths really quick, but I still don't feel like I have an answer to who am I. So how do you get a little bit deeper below the surface there? Yeah.
So what I call that going in through the front door. Okay, so we just walk through the front door, and the question is, what are your strengths? And you write them down. Okay, now you think you've got a complete list, but I will tell you right now, you don't. You've got a good starting point, but now we got to sneak up on you. All right, we got to figure out other ways to get the answer out. And by the way, who you are is not just your strengths. It's a whole combination of things, like your values. What are your guiding principles? And I use the phrase guiding principles in my book, The Next Level Entrepreneur, and it's core to corporations, but it starts with the free enterpriser, business owner, entrepreneur person, because the founder is where the principles of the company are going to come from. You can't just say this non-entity, non-person called the corporation, ABC Corp, we believe in, no, ABC Corp believes in nothing, but the owner does, the founder does, the key leaders do. So when I say guiding principles, and you see this, you guys, you're working in big corp and all that, you'll have the mission, vision, and our core values. And is that the same thing? Yeah, throw all that out. That's all a bunch of BS. And it's gobbledygook that's written by consultants, okay? And it sounds really good, okay? I remember when the green way, everything needed to be green and the green economy and all that stuff. And so all the businesses did was they painted their buildings green, and now see, we've gone green. And it's like, what? No, you didn't. You painted the building green. Okay, we don't want good sounding core values. What I want you to write down are guiding principles in your life. What is it that guides you?
I think that hits on a key difference between these generations, and why you probably think Gen Z is so different is because our values are so different.
Right.
We want real values. We don't want just, we went green. We care about the environment, the building's green. We don't want the shallow, we don't want the greenwashing, we don't want the facades and the masks. We want the real, what do you believe in? What do you want? What's your purpose? What are you good at? Or what are you good for? What are you doing good?
So let me give you a great example. Let's just play with the green thing for a second. So it's like a core value is that we believe in going green. Okay, that's a core value. All right, that's not a guiding principle. A guiding principle would be, I only buy organic food. You see? And when I'm talking about your guiding principles, I'm not talking business necessarily here, or your future business or future free enterprise that you might start. I just want you to know, what are your guiding principles? If a core value would be, I believe in the truth. Okay, but that doesn't guide you. What my guiding principle is I never cheat on my income taxes. I'm always telling the truth to other people. I never lie. That's a guiding principle. I don't lie. No matter how much it costs me, I don't lie.
I like that distinction of guiding, because if you just value honesty, maybe in some situation you might value something a little bit more than being honest. But if you're guided by being honest and you're always following that principle, then there's no relative value that can shake that.
Right. Because we want to get to the core of who you are. And guiding principles, you brainstorm out a long list, but it's going to come down to a short list. I mean, it's not going to be, there were only 10 commandments, Now, I think there was like 635 other laws, but I don't know. And in the United States, we have like 1 billion laws, right? But you don't need 1 billion guiding principles. You just need, this is how I guide my life. This is what I live by. And they're going to cover different things, and they're going to start to reveal aspects of who you are. And so we look at strengths, we're looking at giftings, we're looking at guiding principles, but I want to go a little deeper. I want to get into dreams. What did you dream as a kid? A great example. I was talking to someone and about this very topic, figuring out who you are. And I go, this is a great way to get to it. What were some of your favorite stories or movies? And even better, who is a favorite character in a story or a movie, and why? Okay. And he goes, well, Indiana Jones. I always wanted to be like Indiana Jones. And I did this on purpose. I said, so you wanted to be an archaeologist? And he goes, no, that's not why I wanted to be Indiana Jones. I wanted to have these adventures. And I said, so he goes, but that's stupid. That was a kid, you know, and I had even my son had an Indiana Jones picture, a poster. And I'm like, he goes, but that's stupid. I'll never, you know, go find the lost ark and the pyramids or anything and go on these crazy adventures. I go, no, but it reveals something about your heart, the deepest part of you, not your emotions. This isn't emotions, guys. This is the deepest part of you. It reveals you desire to have adventure. And we were doing my Next Level Navigator process in my book, The Next Level Entrepreneur. And I said, you want to be an entrepreneur. You want to be a free enterprise or business owner. That's adventurous for you. And he goes, you're right. And so because there's an adventure with being an entrepreneur. So I'm a little long-winded there, but that's connecting dots and stories, things you loved as a kid, dreams you had of like imagination plays, all that kind of stuff. Great way to get to dreams and passions. So where we're trying to go with this is with passion, we're trying to get to desires, dreams, desires, passions, because all of those things help us figure out where we're headed. And that's the second step. You've got to map your direction. You've got to know where you're headed. And there's a whole process in my book, if you wanted to get it, The Next Level Entrepreneur, and links are in the description. But here's the thing, is that go in the direction of your passion. And a great example is I wanted to write a book, The Next Level Entrepreneur. And what all the advice was, well, look at current business titles and see what they're writing and write something along that so you'll have a bestseller. And I had a typical Gen Z reaction. What do you think it was, DJ?
I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be the Gen Z reaction? I'm not going to do it the way the system tells me to do it. And so I wrote an incredible book. And I'm not just saying that. I've got people telling me this every time they read it. Because I wanted it to be real, and I wanted it to be good, and I wanted it to be a work of art and all this kind of stuff, because that's my passion. That's my desire. And so I wanted to package stuff in a way that it was readable. I had all these things going on. And so I wrote it from my desire. I wrote it from my passion, because writing a book is really, really, really hard. And if I'm just writing for the next bestseller on some topic I don't even care about, and it gets tough, I quit. I don't ever finish the book. Does that make sense?
Yeah. As you learn more about yourself, it's helping me now just processing this. You learn more about yourself, and you know how to better operate in the world, and you know where you actually want to go. And as you go on that journey, it becomes more and more clear of what you actually want to do, what motivates you, what gets you going, what takes you down, because Gen Z, right? We're very young. We have the whole world ahead of us.
You do.
Where do we want to end up? And we should probably figure out who we are if we want to be able to answer that question with any type of accuracy.
And you probably don't have the time limit of retirement. I'm just saying, because we're bucking the system. I mean, I don't plan on retiring. Why would I retire? That's dumb. If I love what I'm doing, if I hate what I'm doing and I'm just doing it for the retirement, you get the point. With direction, you want to come up with strategies to get there. Okay. So the third step is, based on your passions, desires, skills, giftings, and maybe some experiences you've got, what's monetizable? Because this takes you into free enterprise. And if not every passion is monetizable, not every desire you can make money at, but a lot of them you can. And there's a lot more opportunity today than even just a few years ago because of internet. Content creating is a huge area now, and there's all different kinds of levels in that. You want to go through this quick little 3 steps of figuring out who you are, getting clear about that. Where am I headed? What are some strategies I'm going to do to get there? And then start looking at what's monetizable here. What can I actually turn into a business? And I would recommend listen to our Side Hustle podcast, but I would also say, start it off as a side hustle. We called it a part-time job a while back. That's what you got to do. You got to take some risk, as Phil and Groundhog Day would say.
Sometimes I think you just have to take the big chances.
You got to take some risks, but you don't have to do stupid stuff. You don't have to take stupid risks. Driving on the railroad tracks, stupid risk. But what I'm saying is incremental risks.
Clearly, who you are is a difficult question to answer, and it's going to take a lot of time. So the concept of incremental risk fits right along with that with us Gen Zers, right? We keep on adding incremental risks as we figure out who we are, and then we get clearer and clearer on our direction. And ideally, those incremental risks, we hopefully start seeing some rewards. And I'm starting to see how this can create a lot of synergy for us Gen Zers in actually creating free enterprises and actually bucking this system. We just have to figure out who we are, map our direction, and start building great companies.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point there, AJ, that I need to kind of mention. You're not going to figure out completely who you are. Just get some good ideas going, because where you're trying to get to is some core passion, core principles, and what's monetizable so that you can launch a business. Because I think, honestly, the absolute best therapy for Gen Zers and all of us that are feeling crushed and overwhelmed by whatever systems there are out there against us is action. And it's going to be risky. And you've got to stop as quick as you can playing it safe. And you're going to fail. I'm just going to tell you that. So we just get that off the table. And here's the trick. Fail fast. Get it over with. And it's okay. And this is what I'm learning this in the YouTube world. It's like, get out there, start doing it. You're not going to be ready, but just start doing it, and you're going to get better incrementally as you go along.
So going back to what has Gen Z been doing about all these systems and the complaints I was talking about at the beginning here, instead of leveraging all those complaints, or maybe you air them out every now and then, but really what all that should be driving us towards is answering one of the fundamental questions that you pose in your book. What path now? These are the systems. We don't like them. What are we going to do about it? Do we just want to sit around and complain? Or, like you said, the only path is to start taking action.
Yeah. And the thing is that the free enterprise is not like a direct assault against some of these systems. It's just getting you out of the line of fire and look, just go pursue your own thing. Because by you doing that, it's going to spread and you're going to share it with other friends and people. Well, I just think this is going to click because I think Gen Z has the mentality, the ideas, the principles to be free enterprisers. And so pursue your dreams with strategy, direction, and that includes the monetizable so that you can pursue free enterprise. And even in this over-regulated world we live in, because if they can do it in Poland in a dictatorial system and have free enterprise flowing like you can't imagine, I couldn't, they lived great lives. It wasn't what we were told in the West, believe you me. I'm not advocating, by the way, living under a dictator. I don't think that's a good idea. But you would be amazed how this will transform. Believe you me, your side hustle can absolutely become your main hustle. I know this personally as a fact because that's how I started. I started doing what I do today as a side hustle decades ago. You can too. There's so much more on this, but I'd love for you to watch this podcast right here. I think it's going to give you huge insights. And in the meantime, may you live truly free.